Hello, True Crime Stories podcast family. Welcome back. The Netflix docu-series chronicles the powerful and wealthy Murdaugh family in the Low Country region of South Carolina and several criminal investigations into unsolved deaths surrounding the family. The saga behind Netflix's Murdaugh Docu-series. A Southern scandal was a monster to take on, with added pressure on the filmmakers as details unfolded in real time while they were in production. Directed by Furst and Julia Willoughby Nason, the docu-series chronicles the powerful and wealthy Murdaugh family in the Low Country region of South Carolina and several criminal investigations into unsolved deaths surrounding the family, culminating in the trial and sentencing of former lawyer Alex Murdaugh for the 2021 deaths of his wife and son. Furthermore, the documentary was released before Alex was sentenced on March 2nd. Willoughby Nason says the story is far from over, given that the investigations into the family are still active. Willoughby Nason spoke to THR about the challenges and trepidations of taking on such complicated subject matter and why this story was much more than just a true crime story. How did Willoughby Nason get involved in a documentary about this case? He said the producing partner and showrunner Michael Gasparo brought us this story and said, "Hey, this has a lot of layers to it. This is not just a true crime story, it's showing all these structures of power at play. It's focusing on an intimate tragedy of young adults that we can all relate to. Kids making a stupid decision one night and going out partying. Someone dies in a wreck. It's tragic. That's the core of our story. What attracted me to this whole world was the intimacy of that tragedy. And then through that lens, we were able to open up an underbelly of corruption and greed and powers of social control that's been down in Low Country since what seems like the beginning of time, with the Murdaugh family for generations being solicitors and prosecutors that held court down there. Given the family's influence and power, was there any trepidation to take this on? In production, they were doing investigative journalism around murder, crime, and power structures, especially with law enforcement. So they did everything they could to protect their team and their crew. They were very careful about where they stayed and how they drove around. All the coordinations at play were very thought out because they were vulnerable down there. And as filmmakers, they uncover things that no one else has. And over the years of making these types of investigative documentaries, they had a lot of scary moments. There is humility in knowing that this is beyond entertainment, that these are real people. These are real stories. Was it ever difficult to get the subjects to participate? Yes, it took a lot for Morgan Dowdy to sit with them. Morgan is Paul's ex-girlfriend and was in the boating accident. She had been asked by so many media outlets to tell her story and been harassed in a lot of ways. She was on the side of her friend Mallory, who died, which basically put her against the Murdaughs, so she was vulnerable in that situation. All the kids were vulnerable because they decided they had enough. This was a turning point where this small town of Hampton and the community surrounding it said, "I've had enough, and I'll stick my neck out, no matter what, to go against the Murdaugh name," because they knew this was so close to home. With Morgan, they shared past work with her, and that showed they did really care about the victims' stories. They also spent a huge amount of time with them. They gave a voice to the voiceless. The timeline of making this documentary and its release. They started making the documentary at the ending of summer, early fall of 2021. Alex Murdaugh had not been indicted yet. They were focusing on what was going to happen in the boat wreck case. The roadside shooting, in which Murdaugh was shot almost 3 months after his wife and son's death, had just happened around the time that they laid boots on the ground there, and it became an escalated turn of events while they were making this docu-series. They had to figure out how to incorporate all these new things that were coming in and out and stay focused on this boat wreck throughout. They uncovered a huge amount about Alex while making this in 2 years. They wanted to focus on this story of the boat wreck, the people involved in that, and how that was the precipice of exposing all the misdeeds of this family. The case was ongoing while filmmakers were making the documentary. How did that impact the process? They didn't even know when they would finish the documentary or the date of Alex's trial. They knew it was coming up. But the filmmakers' experience with these docu-series that have cases attached to them, they can never time it. It was serendipitous that this show came out while the trial was happening, so there was a lot more awareness to the story. And it was serendipitous that the whole trial was focused on the boat case because it was the backbone of the series. The boat wreck became a two-way motive. Alex blamed someone who wanted revenge on his son for Paul and Maggie's death, yet it was the reason Alex's financial fraud was discovered. Prosecutors argued that Alex committed the murder to distract people from his financial problems. In the trial, they could finally hear the 911 call where Alex says to the operator, "It's because of the boat wreck that someone's trying to off my son." The series focused specifically on the boat wreck because it was the catalyst that broke open the impenetrable power that the Murdaugh family held in the Low Country for a century. Conversations about doing a follow-up episode with new updates. They were just kicking that idea around. When they were cutting the final episode of the documentary about Khalif Browder, the Khalif Browder story about a young man who was wrongfully arrested for allegedly stealing a backpack and held in Rikers Island for 3 years in New York City, Mayor de Blasio announced that he was going to close Rikers Island and cited Browder's case as one of the reasons. Mike Gasparo sent a message to Alex saying Netflix feels at this point it's very important to have your voice in the remainder of our series. Our first 3 episodes were viewed by 40 million households, and also 75 million hours were watched in just 10 days. Those numbers will continue to rise. We believe you can have the largest platform on TV if you are willing to speak to us. What were some challenges they faced? 2 things. The first one is that this is a gruesome and tragic, painful story. And that was one of the hardest things about making this, being with people that have experienced the most horrific things in their life, being a conduit for them to tell their stories, to sit with them while they're shattering in front of the camera with disbelief, with grief, with agony. That is a very hard part about making this. Just from a storytelling perspective, this story was a mammoth. How did this documentary differ from previous work? They have dealt with the legal system before and dealt with it from the side of the legal system that was not working for people, especially people of color. And in this case, what differed here was this was a white-glove form of legal process. Alex got a 6-week trial. He got the highest-paid lawyers in the country, legend defense attorneys Dick Harpootlian, a sitting state senator, and Jim Griffin, a huge defense attorney. What was different about this was seeing the other side of the legal system and how it actually took down someone that seemed untouchable.